Part 2.
الموجة المتوسطة 1548.
You are tuned into our Friday evening panel discussion, and this evening we're discussing Muslims' contribution to civilization. We have with us on the line from Durban, Maulana Yunoos Osman, as well as from Port Elizabeth, Maulana Muhammad Bacha. Maulana Osman Sab, someone asking a question, and I thought Maulana can just respond to it very quickly. For how did Islam spread to Spain, and for how long did Muslims rule in Spain? Not directly linked to our topic, but it will come in somewhere. But for the benefit of the person asking the question, as we move along, Mark can just
Well, that's a historical question. In the year 711, we know that the Visigothic rulers of Spain were very harsh and very difficult on their own subjects in Spain itself, and the Christians of Spain were persecuted by their own rulers of the time. And if the Muslim rulers of Morocco, which were under the Khilafat of the Umayyad dynasty in 711, were approached by the Christians that were living in certain parts of Spain, and via their envoys, which were already in Ceuta, which is part of Morocco today, had come to Morocco to Musa ibn Nusayr and insisted upon Musa ibn Nusayr to go into Spain to free the Christians. So it was in 711 that Musa ibn Nusayr had sent in Tariq ibn Ziyad with an expedition first and then later on to invade Spain to free the people of Spain from the persecution that was being put upon them by their own rulers, the Visigothic rulers of Spain at that time. So 711 Muslims had come into Spain, and it was in April in that year, 711, and within a very short period of time, the entire Spain, starting from Gibraltar, which was known as Jabal Tariq ibn Ziyad at that time, and right up to the southern part of France, was under Muslim control. And we do know that big centers like Cordoba, Seville, which was Ispilia at that time, Granada, in fact up to Madrid had become a camping site for the Muslim armies. And Toledo had once upon a time had become one of the greatest translating centers. In fact, if you go to a place called Loja today, which is Loja today, it's called Loja. It was called Loja, and there a Darul Ulum had existed. Granada had 4 or 5 Darul Ulums. Cordoba had several Darul Ulums. We do know that Ibn Rushd, Ibn Hafiz, Ibn Hazm, and Allama Qurtubi, the Imam of the Masjid, of the great Masjid, was in Cordoba. And different parts of Spain had come into our control, and it was up to the year 1492, that is the first week of January 1492, that the last post of the Muslims in Spain had been lost, and that was in Granada. We had held the rule of Granada up to 1492, so it was about 800 years Muslims had ruled over Spain. And within a very short period of time, that is 10 years after the fall of Granada, Islam was totally banned in the entire Spain. So 711 Muslims had come into Spain up to 1492. And for the next 500 years, from 1492 up till 1987, as recently as 1987, Islam was totally banned in Spain to be practiced as a acceptable religion. So yes, we came in at 711, in April 711 up to January 1492. In fact, on the 1st of April 1492, the last king of Spain, Muslim king of Spain, Abu Abdullah, with his mother, were banished and sent out of Spain, where he died in Fez in Morocco.
Maulana, Jazakumullah khair for summing up that and answering the question of the listener. Continuing with our discussion on Muslims' contribution to civilization, and that also links to Spain. But on the issue itself, from what era did Muslims begin to contribute to civilization? You made reference to it earlier on the program.
Yes, earlier in 780 already we had formed what is referred to as the Beit al-Hikmah, which is the House of Wisdom, and eventually throughout we had rival universities which were established in Cordoba, in Cairo. We had the universities in Cairo, we had the universities and the institutions in Cordoba, and that is now, we are starting from the year 786 onwards, right up to the 16th, 17th centuries, when Muslim areas were totally colonized under the Western world. Up to that time, Muslim contribution had continued. We do know, as we had discussed earlier, that a lot of scholars in the past had dependent solely on Muslim scholarship. Many European scholars, such as I made mention of Roger Bacon, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Kepler, Copernicus, Galileo himself, among others, were profoundly influenced and inspired by Muslim scholars. Now, from that time, that is 780 upwards, because the ancient science and the science of the old were then translated firstly in Baghdad and later on in Toledo. We had great centers of translation. At one given time, a place in Spain, which is Armenia, is referred to on the Mediterranean coast, Almira, was referred to as Cambridge of Spain and the Muslim world at that time. Now, the first innovation, which was one of the major innovations of that time, was the major innovation of this period was paper. Originally a secret tightly guarded by the Chinese, but the art of paper making was learned from the Chinese already in the year 751, resulting in paper mills being built in the cities of Samarkand. Now, already Samarkand, which is Transoxania, which is Mawara al-Bahar, we had Samarkand, Bukhara, Tashkent. We find that in these places we found plenty of paper mills being established. In Baghdad, we had several paper mills. The Arabs improved upon the Chinese techniques by using starch to account for the Muslim preference for pens. I mean, we were using pens to write rather than any other instrument, and we found that we had improved on the techniques of making paper. By 900, that is already early stages of Islamic history, there were hundreds of shops employing scribes and binders for books in Baghdad, and even in public libraries. They were writing out books, etc. So public libraries began to become, they were established in a very large scale, including the first lending library. From there, paper making spread to west to Fez in Morocco, and then to Spain, and from there to Europe in the 13th century. So we find that the first important thing for education and knowledge was paper, and we had already perfected the art of making paper itself. A Muslim manuscript made from cotton paper, imagine, dating from the 11th century, was discovered in the Escorial Library in Madrid. And the Danish historian Pedersen said that by manufacturing paper on a large scale, the Muslims accomplished a feat of crucial significance, not only to the history of Islamic books, but also to the whole world of books. So here we found a certain innovation, and we invented something that became beneficial for education and the spread of education itself.
Yes, indeed, an important innovation. Maulana Muhammad Bashir Sahab, from the beginning stages of when Muslims began to contribute to civilization, what were some of the things that they contributed with, and the time frame for that?
Okay, in fact, I found some things that even go back to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. In other words, even in time of Umar radiallahu anhu, where I came across something interesting in the Saudi Aramco magazine. That's quite an interesting magazine, where they mentioned the aspect of the Suez Canal. And we assume that this was something, generally we assume that this was something that was recently done, maybe in the 1800s, 1900s. But if you go back, you see that Umar radiallahu anhu was what a master leader, that when the Muslims conquered Egypt and Medina Munawwara was going through a period of drought, then he wrote to the governor there, Amr bin As radiallahu anhu, and he told him that we need to get supplies from Egypt of food down to Medina and Makkah Mukarramah. And he found out about there was a previous canal that was linking the in the area where Cairo is today, from there going down the Nile and coming out into the Red Sea. So he found out about this, and he sent instructions to Hazrat Amr bin As radiallahu anhu to reopen this particular channel, and they found some of the part of it that was built by the Persians, Romans, etc., and they added on to it, and eventually this became a way that they used to bring supplies, food supplies to Makkah and Medina Munawwara. Similarly, Umar radiallahu anhu, in his governance, things that he introduced in government in that period of time, a lot of those things have been carried forward in government and in different governing systems around the world, even up to today. When you look at the consultative assembly that he established, even drought relief, and this was something amazing when the Somali drought, when we were going through that particular time, and I did a bit of research on it. Then when there was drought, the systems that Umar radiallahu anh put into place to see to drought relief in the areas of the Muslim empire that were under his control, amazing. And these were things that were carried forward right through to our times. For example, where he established different departments to handle the food that was coming in from outside, how to distribute it, what sort of measures he put into place to see to it that the citizens were able to go through the drought, etc. So even from that time, the Muslims had been contributing to civilization, and even when it comes to horses, for example, when the Sahaba radiallahu anhum went out from the Arabian Peninsula into different areas of the world, the main mode of transport was the Arab horse. And this eventually when they went to different places, it formed the basis of the different horse breeds that we have around the world today, the Arab horse. And this is something that the Sahaba brought through to different parts of the world. And that brings me back to the point that Maulana Uthman mentioned in the beginning, that the motivation for many of the things that Muslims had contributed to civilization were deep-rooted within the Quran, within the Sunnah, within the desire to worship Allah. When it comes to the horses, like I said, it was a desire to go out and spread the message of Islam that motivated. It wasn't just to go out and take animals and breed them and bring them into different areas. When it came to watches, for example, clocks, Muslims were at the forefront of inventing and improving upon clockwork mechanisms, etc. And this was motivated by, I would like to think, motivated by a desire to know the times of Salah so they could worship Allah Azza wa Jal. Similarly, when it came to carpets and mats and rugs, Muslims from different parts, from Persia, etc., were at the forefront and masters in this trade. And I would like to know, or I would like to believe that it was motivated by the desire that every Muslim had to worship Allah 5 times a day, wherever he might be or she might be, that they needed something to put down to read their salah upon. And like there's so many other things, even medicine, maybe they got the inspiration from the ayats of the Quran pertaining to different cure that was found in different foods from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this motivated them to go in deeper into these fields. So the primary driving force, the thing that ignited the Muslims in the past to go out into these different fields, to innovate so many things, to invent so many things, to improve upon so many things, was the desire to please Allah Azza wa Jal. And as a result, these different sciences, which they brought under their control, these different sciences improved and became a means of contributing to civilization.
Yes, indeed, subhanAllah, an amazing point that it was all done for the sake of Allah, taking us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do have a caller on the line. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah for calling into the program. Your contribution.
How are you, Mufti Yusuf, and assalamu alaikum to your esteemed panel of guests.
All well, alhamdulillah.
I just got a couple of questions.
Yes.
Firstly, maybe one of the panelists can just enlighten us on the contribution of Ibn Sina. Firstly, his origins, and when did he introduce the process of distillation, and when for the sisters, I believe he also sort of started the art of perfumery. Sort of when did he commence that? Secondly, is we noticed the fall of Islam in Spain. It like kind of more or less coincided with the ostentation for building sort of wasting money on elaborate structures. Now looking at the moment, like in the Middle East, lots of money is being spent in all these huge skyscrapers. Now, bearing that in mind, in the last few centuries, the contributions by Muslims to civilization in terms of inventions and things have been few and far between. fair to say that the first 1,000 years. How can this revival be brought about? To create, to get the Muslims more active in contributing, to inventions and other factors of society.
Jazakallah, noted all the points, and inshallah the revival issue we'll tackle towards the end of the program. The other issues we'll put to the guests. Jazakallah for the call. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Maulana Yunoos, any of the two issues that you'd like to pick up?
We will, alhamdulillah, the brother has brought up a very important scholar in history, which is Hussein ibn Abdullah ibn Sina. He is referred to and anglicized his name to Avicenna. The West has done so. He is from Uzbekistan. He was born in the year 980 and he left us in the year 1037. Though he was a very great scholar, Islamic scholar as well, he was Hafiz of the Quran, and a polymath means he was a master of many sciences. But with all that, he was one of the greatest physicians and philosophers of his time. His most famous work, the Book of Healing, a very vast philosophical and scientific encyclopedia, and also the Canon of Medicine, which was a standard medical textbook at many medieval universities. In fact, his Canon of Medicine became the medical textbook of Europe right until the 18th century. So much so that it has been said that anyone who wants to be a good doctor must be an Avicenist. It is an old European common saying, and right up to 1930, his works were referred to and his works were translated into English. But just going further, that is a science which we will cover through our discussions. I just want to add on to what Maulana had said earlier. Most of our inventions and modern civilization, there's one important aspect which is referred to as astronomy. Maulana earlier says that it was the Quran which gave us that encouragement as well, and we studied for the purpose of eventually leading us to our ibadah, whether it was the invention of the clock or whether it was traveling, etc. Now we know astronomy itself is something that had originated in the Quran. If you look at the surah, the 6th surah, verse 98, where it's stated, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has made the stars for us, so that you may be guided thereby in the darkness of the land and the sea. Here again, people who are traveling, this led to 2 or 3 different sciences. One is geography itself, and one is astronomy. Astronomy became a very important science of the time. The Quran has affected astronomy directly and indirectly. It advised Muslims to find ways of using the stars. On the basis of this advice, many Muslims began to find better observational and navigational instruments. Thus, most navigational stars today have Arabic origin, and that is a very important thing. In fact, they gave names and assigned magnitudes to approximately 1,022 stars in all. Today, over 165 stars still have names that reflect their original Arabic names, and that is a very great contribution. In fact, Ma'mun, who I spoke of earlier, had built the very first observatory in Baghdad. And he's not only built the first observatory in the Muslim world, but also the first observatory in the whole world in history. That is understood. So this was again something that they studied from the Quran, and they said to themselves that no, we have to create the science for the benefit of the religion itself, and later on their contribution became a very important thing. If you look at Muhammad al-Fazari, who was an Iraqi as well in the year 800, he is credited to have built the very first astrolabe, and the astrolabe was used for measuring the length and stars, etc., and seeing to these the science of astronomy had come into existence. If we go back and you look at Muhammad ibn Musa ibn Shakir, who also is an Iraqi and born in the year 803, passed away in the year 873, he pioneered astrophysics. He was the first to discover that the heavenly bodies was subjected to the same laws of physics as the earth itself. So these were the things that eventually led to what Newton's laws were and overshadowed Newton's laws. So not only used these sciences for ibadah as well, but eventually it became a means of great measurements. If I give you another example of Muhammad ibn Jabir al-Battani, who is also an Iraqi born in the year 850. He was a great astronomer, a great mathematician, and his best known achievement was the determination of the solar year as being 365 days, 5 hours, 46 minutes, and 24 seconds. Now imagine they measured these things in 1200 years ago. He even corrected some of Ptolemy, who was this Greek philosopher and thinker's results, and compiled new tables of the sun and the moon. So we went further, and later on in the years that came, many of the scholars whom we know, Nicholas Copernicus I mentioned in the earlier 15th century, 700 years after Ibn Jabir al-Battani had already introduced this, he makes a reference of his works in his personal books. So we had contributed into the sciences for the benefit of the world eventually, while studying the Quran and using this for the benefit of deen and religion as well. We look at Abdul Rahman al-Sufi, another great stargazer, and he published his great famous book of fixed stars. And in 964, he made the earliest recorded observation of what is now the Andromeda galaxy, our closest neighbor. And these are made mention in later years. In 1612 is when the Europeans acknowledged this. So we go further. There are several such great scholars who have contributed in this particular science, and that's very important.
Yes, we'll continue with that discussion. Mullah Muhammad Bacha Sahab, anything you'd like to add, comments on what the caller had raised, some of the remarks?
Just an interesting point on Ibn Sina, since he brought him up. The melding or bringing together of both what we would call in our terms what you call the acquired sciences and the revealed sciences. Ibn Sina, according to the information that I had found, was that he had memorized the Quran at a very early age, and then he turned to science, medicine, and he was an all-round master in different subjects: astronomer, chemist, doctor, you can say physician, poet, scientist. And even towards his last moments of his life, then he asked for the Quran to be read to him. So again, this is something very important that we can bring from our past, that we can bring these two together, inshallah.
Inshallah. Coming up to 2 minutes to 9, it's time for our bulletin coming up shortly. We'll continue with the discussion after the short break, inshallah. Stay tuned to the program. Reminder to the listeners that throughout the program you can contribute on 011-854-1548 or SMS 0786 009 888, or you could email ym@radioislam.co.za.